Hello, my little Lunas. Welcome. No, that was wrong. Hello, my little Lunas. Hope you're having. Oh, no, I can't remember what it is. Hold on. Hello, my little Lunas. Welcome back to another one. Sorry, the intro is horribly on this one. My dog is walking around behind me for some reason. Can you not? Okay. She's gonna do it anyway. Anyway, today I am presenting you with Chapter 4 of Ghostly Bonds. Thank you again, KittyKqt, for letting me podfic this. And let's get right into the summary. The summary of this one is Chapter 4. The name of this chapter is Chapter 4, Stay Gentle by Brandy Carley. Summary, funeral and quirk analysis. The notes/TW warnings on this one is suicide attempt. And the other author note is please be very careful of reading this if you're worried about any sensitive items. Let's get right into the fic. At 2 weeks dead, he had to sit through his own funeral. He wouldn't let his mum do this without him. She had been through so much to give him the life he wasted, so the least he could do now was be near her as she cried. There were more people who came to his funeral than he would have thought 2 weeks ago. His entire class showed up, except for Kachan's friend who argued. Even the lunch lady he talked to daily showed up, with a tray of food for his mum. He floated around the area, watching each person cry in their own way. Some sobbed loudly, while others looked still-faced. He had never realized how many people cared for him until he saw them gathering for his death. A few of the homeless people he had given his lunches to were present, along with Paul from downstairs. He sat and listened as the person in charge said something about his life ending too short. He never thought he would agree, but every part of him wanted to hug his mum right now. Tell her that it would be alright and it would be okay without him. Eraserhead stepped up to the podium, dressed in his civilian outfit. Izuku crossed his legs to listen to the hero. I didn't know Midori Izuku like some of you did. I don't pretend to know anything about his life. He cleared his throat, scanning the crowd. I'm the one who found him after the incident. I've spent the past few weeks blaming myself for not being faster. If I had just started my rounds earlier in the day or had seen his red shoes on the roof sooner, I could have stopped him, but I didn't. He took a deep breath, looking down at his hands. Izuku floated over to see him holding a small pocket with a picture of 3 teenagers in it. He could easily identify Eraserhead, but he couldn't place the blonde or blue-haired boy. I lost a friend when I was Izuku's age, and I spent years blaming myself for his death as well. But I got help, and I learned how to help others because of it. I can't save Izuku, but that doesn't mean I won't try to save others. I know he had big dreams of being a hero and joining UA. I've listened to his mother talk about it, and for that reason, I've talked to the principal UA and we've made a deal. He stepped back, and Nezu stepped up to the podium from somewhere. Nezu, the smartest creature in Japan, possibly the world. He was at Izuku's funeral. Izuku's heart leaped in excitement as he stared at one of his biggest heroes. We are opening our doors to quirkless individuals, Nezu said, clapping his hands. Mom gasped, clutching her chest as she stared up in shock. Izuku had always wanted to go to UA, but without a quirk he wasn't allowed to try. They had said he could have gotten hurt or died if he tried. This would mean that he could try if he wanted, and if he was still alive. The rule banning the quirkless was put in place at the dawn of heroes, but looking at Midori's short life has shown me something. He put something on the podium, out of sight of everyone else, but Izuku could see his hero notebook number 13 placed on it. He was a brilliant young man who had all the makings of the greatest hero in Japan has ever seen. Even without a quirk, he was a genius. Nezu's whiskers stretched as he looked back up at Izuku's short class. It truly is a pity I will never be able to nurture that brilliant mind. The rest of the speeches passed in a blur as Izuku's thoughts spiraled. Nezu, the smartest creature in Japan, had thought he could be a hero. He had wished to help Izuku in his goals and nurture his mind. He could have been a hero instead of dying. He had been selfish. As the funeral died down, each person went up to the closed casket, setting a flower on top. None of them were spider lilies. He watched people he had barely spoken to weep over him, and his heart ached. All this pain because he had decided he wasn't strong enough. Kachan, Auntie and Uncle were one of the last ones to place the flowers, white roses. Kachan hesitated and Izuku frowned, floating upside down in front of him. He had thought that Kachan would at least be happy about it, but he was crying over Izuku's casket, thorns pushing into his palm. Izuku blinked in shock as he dropped the flower and rubbed at his eyes, wiping his palms on his jacket. His hands let off small pops as he sweat, storming out of the building. "I'm not ready to say goodbye," Mum said, catching his attention again. He floated down to her, standing beside her. He knew he couldn't touch or feel her warmth, but he wanted to be by her. He shut his eyes and reached for her rope, taking in her sweet smell as he rested his hand there. He glanced around the room in the strange monochrome vision, watching people file out. He could see their forms, but not who each one was, as they all cried for a boy who decided to leave. He had put this pain on them. He was an idiot. He sat on his bed the best he could, floating a few inches above the All Might comforter. It disgusted him now, after his hero had denied him, but he couldn't exactly change it in this form. He chewed on his cheek since he couldn't bite the eraser, twiddling the pencil in his fingers. Over the past month, he had figured out how to hold small items, as long as he kept concentration focused solely on the object. Sadly, he tended to lose himself in analysis a lot and dropped the pencil. He did it again, frowning as it buried itself in his old blankets. His newest analysis book was open on the bed as he tried to come up with questions to test with his quirk. He managed to fish out the pencil, forcing his energy to the tips of his fingers again, trying just to get the ones he needed. The second his pencil touched the paper, though, it slipped out of his grasp and back onto the blankets. He grumbled slightly, trying to grab the pencil again. He failed, and it fell on the floor, further out of his grasp. As it hit the floor, he paused, hoping his mother hadn't heard. She hadn't left the house in days, and every sound seemed to startle her. He knew he should probably show himself to her, in his weird way, but she didn't need that. She didn't need to know that Izuku was more useless than he had ever been, not even able to hold a pencil. And his death had brought her something far better than him. She had the detective now. He was a friend that she had never allowed herself to have before he died, along with Eraserhead. It was nice to see her get sleep and full meals, even smiling at some of the bad jokes they made. Izuku was fine, watching over his mum in secret. He shut his eyes, willing the ropes to appear again. Only his mum's, the detectives, and Kachan's were still there. He assumed there was a life about a month on the ropes, needing to be redone every once in a while. He had missed the opportunity to talk to Mum the detective last time, surprised he had touched them again. Kachan's would be gone in a few days. He glanced around, hitting each rope to find his mum's. Hers and the detective's were close together again. He furrowed his brows, about to grab it before something caught his attention. The pencil that had rolled across the floor was glowing a light blue colour, nothing like he had seen. He reached for it and immediately felt a shock running through his body from his outstretched hand. His mum's scent hit his nose again. He bit his lip, preparing for the worst, and closed his hands. The pencil lifted off the floor before falling nearby. He tried again, but got the same results, the pencil barely moving. He opened his eyes, staring at the normal pencil, trying to decide another course of action. He sighed, floating across the room to hover by his notebooks. His mum's scent meant that the new pocket of information was connected to his mum, and the pencil lifting reminded him of her quirk. He focused the energy in his finger, trying to grab the first notebook he had ever done from the shelf. He managed to get some purchase on it. Pulling it out, it fell to the floor with a loud sound, and he froze midair. "Izuku?" Mom asked from the living room, and he silently cursed. No, 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 no. He shot across the room fast as he could, forcing himself to grab the new notebook. His mum couldn't see it. She couldn't know. He managed to get the notebook. Right as the doorknob rattled, he launched it across the room, out the cracked window, and sighed when he heard it hit the fire escape. The door opened, and his mum stepped in, tears in her eyes. "Baby?" she asked, stepping further into the room. The detective stepped in beside her, rubbing her back like he always did. "He's not hearing her," he said gently, and Mum nodded, rubbing at her eyes. She stopped, eyes catching on the notebook laying open on the floor. She grabbed it, sobbing again as she read the page. Damn it, he had made her cry again, and he wasn't even alive. "It's his first entry," she said, tracing the pages with her quirk analysis on it. It was a messy one, definitely not his best work, but it started something that had changed him. The detective comforted her like Izuku couldn't, rubbing at her back silently as she scanned the entry. He scanned the entry as well, floating above her head to see the pages. "It was me. I was the one he wanted to talk to first," Mum said quietly as he analysed the pages again, his absent heart hurting. There were no sticky notes placed in from where he had figured out more and changed it all. "He loved you," the detective said gently as Izuku bit his lip. He still loved her. Her quirk was similar to that of a wave of energy. She could manipulate small airwaves, much like his own quirk, and pull very small items to her. It was probably why the only thing he could do so far was a pencil. She had said that her quirk took time to get the size of books, like training a muscle. He probably had a base level of her quirk, not her current strength. His mum sobbed, catching his attention off guard from quirk analysis again. "Sometimes I can feel him watching me." She took a deep breath, swallowing another sob before speaking again. "The day I found out, I swear I heard him say Mom." The detective sighed, grabbing her shoulder and leading her out. She set the book on his desk, and as she followed him, pushed into his side. Izuku waited until the door shut to look over the analysis again. His heart screamed at him, but maybe there was nothing he could give his mum. She had always done something with her hands when calling objects towards her. Maybe if he just tried that. He turned around and shut his eyes again. The blue glow around the pencil returned, and he reached for it. He tugged on the electricity slightly, lifting the pencil up. He exhaled, revealing a wave of air lifting the pencil up. He exhaled, revealing a wave of air motions leading to the pencil. He twisted his hand slightly and the pencil dropped. It took him another hour, but he managed to get the pencil in the air and to him before it fell. "Yes!" he screamed, shooting up in the air and twirling around. Maybe his quirk wasn't as useless as he thought. If he could figure it out, maybe he could still be a hero. Not one whose name would be in any charts, but he could help from the background. He could do it. It had been half a year since he died, and the days were getting longer and longer. When you didn't truly exist, it was hard to find stuff to pass the day with. He didn't need to go to school, or even down to dinner with his mum, though he did. He kept her company how he could, hovering his hand above hers as she sat, staring at her food. "This was always your favourite, baby," she muttered, looking into the cartridon that the detective had brought over. "I know, Mama," he said, frowning. She still hadn't returned to her normal hours, often sent home early by her bosses. Izuku followed her around whenever he could, trying to comfort her. It would get better. He shut his eyes and sighed when he didn't see any ropes in his vision again. Hers had run out a few days prior, but he was nervous to make a new one. Should he talk to her, or should he leave her alone? She didn't need that. He bit his lip, deciding to do it now. He pushed his energy into his hands, taking a deep breath and made contact. "It's okay to move on, Mama," he said, trying not to choke on his tears. His words faded out in the middle of Mama, his hand slipping through. She straightened, scanning the room, seeming to look Izuku right in the eyes. "Baby," she said, tears streaming down her face. She bit her lip, shaking her head. "I need to get more sleep," she muttered, looking back down at her food. A knock on the door startled both of them as the detective unlocked it with his key. "Hey, Unko," he said sheepishly, shutting the door behind him. Izuku knew what he was doing. Since he had passed, his mum had lost a lot of weight, oftentimes just staring at the food, so the detective had started coming around when it was mealtime, helping her just by being there and eating with her. "Izuku's favourite today?" he asked, moving her hair behind her back as she nodded. "I feel guilty, Nasuma." Nope, that's not his name. I can't remember how to say it. Hold on. Sukuchi Namasa. There we go. Not whatever the hell I said. "I feel guilty, Namasa. Hell, every time. Sukuchi Namasa. "I feel guilty, Namasa," she said, gently as his hands paused on her back. "How can I move on when he can't?" she asked, leaning back on him. "Is it truly okay?" Yes, it was okay, Mama. He made a decision, and he had died for it, but that didn't mean he wanted his mum to suffer for it. She deserved to move on. "I don't know, Inko," he said gently, sitting down beside her. "I don't know, Izuku." She nodded as the detective took a deep breath. "But I know you, and if he was anything like you, the sweet, caring, loving person you are, Then I know he wouldn't want you to be held back by this. Izuku wiped his teary eyes, nodding along. You are a great person, Inko, he said, pulling her hair behind her ear. You deserve to have a life, just like he did, he said, and she nodded, leaning into him. Izuku floated away, out of the door and into the night air. His mother deserved to move on, and he couldn't hinder that. As much as he wanted to stay with her, it was no longer an option. He didn't know where he was going, as he wandered, but he just wanted to go away. Eventually, the street seemed to feel really familiar as he moved before he was staring up at Kachan's house. His house was much bigger than Izuku's own apartment, stretching 2 stories high with multiple rooms. He hesitated outside, pacing in the air. He didn't know what had brought him here, but he was here now, and he had nowhere else to go. He watched the sun go down fully on another day, unmoving from where he floated. When you were dead, the days passing no longer mattered. He didn't get tired, so there was no reason to sleep. Kachan stepped out of the house, looking around the big yard. Izuku hesitated before floating up to him, watching him sigh. He pushed his loose spikes back, and Izuku could tell he was using the cool night air to help with his sweating. He often did it when he was nervous. What he was nervous about, though, Izuku had no clue. He knew UA entrance exams were coming up, but Kachan was perfect for UA. He didn't need to worry. His hands popped as he groaned, collapsing onto the grass. Izuku joined him, staring up at the stars like they used to do when they were younger. It was nice to listen to his old friend's voice once he talked about everything and nothing. I think you'd like the beach. You can see the ocean now, Kachan said, and Izuku looked over, noticing the steady rise and fall of his chest. Blah. I've cleared a lot of the trash. Izuku nodded, listening to his friend keep rambling about the beach they used to go. It had been years, far before he was diagnosed quirkless, since they had been. Izuku could only recall the soft sand from back then, but now the beach was a dumping ground for many illegal items and just a waste site. Izuku would love to see it again, but he was hesitant to leave Kachan, enjoying this time together. He had never had another friend after Kachan, so it was nice to be around someone, even if they didn't know he was there. Kachan's voice died out eventually, and Izuku glanced back over to see him asleep among the grass. Izuku hesitated before reaching forward and taking Kachan's wrist in his hand. He managed to hold it before his hand slipped through, taking a deep breath. Kachan didn't stir at the touch, but he did pick up his wrist and move it away in his sleep. It was fine. Izuku had what he needed. The connection was made. He floated up off the floor and shut his eyes, willing the ropes to come back into his vision. They appeared, and he grabbed the shortest one, connected to Kachan, sighing when attacked by the sweet caramel scent. He didn't want to use it right now, but something else, another part of Kachan, his quirk. He didn't see any changes to the monochrome environment, like with his mum's quirk, but Kachan's quirk was different. It didn't affect his environment, it was personal. Izuku glanced down at his hands, pushing his energy into his hands. They glowed a light orange, and he grinned, pushing more and more. And then they died out. Damn it. He tried again, but he wasn't able to get the glow back this time around. He hummed, trying to think of all he had written for Kachan's quirk. He could use his mum's ropes to get him back to his books, but she needed to be without him right now. Kachan's ability used his sweat. As a ghost, Izuku couldn't drink water, meaning he couldn't sweat. So did that mean he couldn't use Kachan's quirk? But his hands glowed like they did when he was using his mom's quirk. So maybe it was just slightly altered. She didn't see airwaves either when using her quirk, but he did. He tried for hours, watching over Kachan as he slept peacefully on the grass beneath him. It must have been cold, but he didn't move at all, his chest rising and falling slowly. Finally, Izuku managed to make his hands glow again before they popped loudly and fizzled out. I got it! He screamed as Kachan jumped up, turning his head around himself to find what the noise was. Izuku had used his quirk. He bit his lip, trying to suppress a grin as he got a bad idea. He could freak Kachan out with this. If he just randomly let off his own explosions everywhere, it would look like he was going crazy. Izuku tried to get his hands to pop again, but failed, frowning. Kachan rubbed at the back of his neck awkwardly, standing straighter. Fucking cold out here, he muttered, walking inside, leaving Izuku behind. He really needed to make a full analysis on his quirk. He closed his eyes and grabbed his mum's rope, pulling himself forward. He steadied himself quickly enough, glancing around the dark room. He gave his mum a phantom kiss on her head, leaving her bedroom to go to his. The detective was sleeping on the couch. The house looked cleaner than it had since Izuku had been alive. He was just glad his mum had someone, but part of him felt jealous that he couldn't be that someone, and then he felt bad for feeling jealous. He shook his head, floating into his room, and out onto the fire escape. He pushed his energy into his hands, grabbing the notebook gently and pulling it through the open cracked window. He was lucky his mum hadn't touched it or anything else in his room yet. He flipped it over, hovering over his bed as he stared at the pages. Where could he even start on a quirk he knew so little about? He couldn't even fill out the section of his appearance because he didn't have one. He didn't appear in mirrors or pictures despite his attempts, so what he looked like was a mystery to him. He groaned, flopping back and somersaulting through the air. Being dead was not fun. He paused, floating back to his open notebook, deciding just to write what he could. He could always change it later. Quirk name, Ghost Touch. Quirk user, Midori Izuku. He smiled slightly, viewing his name written on the page. He had finally gotten what he wanted most in the world. It just came at a high price for him. He shook his head, returning to what he did best. Description. The user is intangible and cannot be seen by anyone. The quirk can only be activated after the user has physically died, leaving them without a corporeal body. In Izuku's case, it came in the form of a large fall, subjected by suicide. If the user focuses enough energy onto their body parts, they can interact with the physical world in small ways. Energy takes time to recharge. Explore the time differences. Abilities. Rope pull. When a user touches a living human, they form a bond between them. In order to activate this function, the user must remove their sight sensors by closing their eyes, changing the way they see. A monochrome green world is outlining everything. Ropes now available. When each rope is touched, it sends the user the base scent of any person they have formed a bond with. Pulling the rope will pull the user to that human's form. Does not work on animals. If anchor is in motion, the user will end up in the last place the anchor was. The larger the distance, the more energy it takes. Quirk borrow. Using the already formed bond between the user and the anchor, the user can utilize the base form for the anchor's quirk. This is significantly weaker than the anchor's version, and the user will need to practice often to train with each borrowed quirk. Depicted in off vision as a colored glowing object depending on the quirk borrowed. Limitations still in question.
Okay, hello little Lunas. That's the end of this one. Sorry, first of all, that I'm so quiet, and second of all, this is not a proper outro, but this is all we've got for now. Sorry about that. But yeah, that's all for this one. I'll see you in the next one.